Nora Ashford didn't expect to fall apart in public, certainly not in 4-inch heels. On a grimy city bench, outside a taco truck with a line of tourists behind her. Her fingers shook violently as she tried unlocking her phone, but her vision blurred. Her chest tightened like a vice, her lungs refusing to cooperate. The city noise, the honking horns, the yelling vendors, the sirens was a roar in her ears. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She was going to collapse, right here, in front of strangers. "Hey," a voice said beside her, low, calm, warm. "You're okay, just breathe with me, all right." She didn't look up, she couldn't. "I know how this feels, like the world's closing in, but it's not, you're safe, I promise." A hand not touching her, just hovering near, guided her attention. "Can you look at me?" She forced her head to turn. Sea blue eyes met hers. The man was in his early 30s, unshaven, worn denim jacket, tired eyes, but kind and steady. "Name's Zayden," he said gently, "and you're not alone right now. Whatever's got you in a chokehold, it's gonna pass. You just gotta ride it out." She choked. "I can't." "Yes, you can, I've got you. Count with me, in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. She followed his lead, slowly, desperately. "Out for 6, 1, 2, 3. It took minutes, maybe more, but the panic began to ebb. Her hands still trembled, but she could feel her heartbeat slowing. "You're doing amazing," Zayden said, crouching next to her now. "Would it help to hold something? Sometimes grounding helps." She nodded, barely. He handed her a tiny blue plastic dinosaur from his pocket. She blinked, a triceratops. He gave a soft chuckle. "My kid's obsessed, left it in my jacket this morning, figured it earned a second life." Her eyes dropped to the toy, then flicked up to his. She let out a shaky breath. "Thank you." "Anytime," he said, and stood up slowly, brushing off his jeans. "You good if I sit for a minute? My feet are killing me." She nodded, and he plopped down beside her like they were old friends. "I'm Nora," she said after a beat, her voice hoarse. "Nice to meet you, Nora. Wanna talk about what just happened?" She hesitated. "I just left a boardroom full of billionaires. They were all waiting for me to make a decision that could cost the company millions. I walked out, couldn't breathe, so I ran." His brow lifted, impressed. "Boardroom full of billionaires?" "I'm the CEO of Ashford Tech, or at least, I was 5 minutes ago." Zayden whistled. "And here I thought I was crushing it because I managed to get my kid to preschool on time with both shoes on." Despite herself, she laughed. "You're a dad," she said, glancing at him properly now. He looked exhausted, dark shadows under his eyes, a faint stain on his sleeve that suspiciously looked like applesauce. "Yeah, single dad. My son Zeke is 4 going on 40. He thinks I work at a spaceship company. I actually do maintenance at a hotel downtown, nights mostly." Nora's chest tightened again, but this time with something unfamiliar. She'd spent the last 5 years surrounded by men in tailored suits and scripted charm. Zayden was real, worn in, kind. "Thank you for everything, I mean it." He smiled. "Don't mention it, we all fall apart sometimes, but not everyone sticks around when we do." They sat in silence for a few moments, the noise of the city moving around them. "Do you do this often?" she asked. "Talk women through panic attacks on benches?" He grinned. Only the ones who look like they could buy the entire block and still be the loneliest person on it. She laughed again, surprised by how good it felt. He stood, brushing off his pants. "You okay to head back into billionaire land?" She looked toward the direction of her office, then back at him. "Not today." "Smart choice." She stood too, smoothing her skirt. "Can I repay you? Coffee?" He hesitated. "I'd love to, but I gotta pick Zeke up in 20 minutes. Rain check." She nodded. Rain check. He started to walk off, then paused. "You know where to find this bench if you need to breathe again." She watched him disappear into the crowd, her heart still fluttering, but not from panic this time. 3 days later, Nora came back to the bench. She didn't know why. She'd spent 70 straight hours catching up on work, fielding investor calls, pretending nothing had happened. But she hadn't been able to stop thinking about him. "Zayden." His eyes, his voice, that stupid plastic dinosaur. This time, he was already there, sitting with a juice box in one hand and a sleepy little boy leaning against him. Zayden looked up startled, then smiled. "Hey," he said. Zeke looked up too. "Daddy, is that the lady you helped?" Nora knelt at the edge of the bench. "It is. Hi, Zeke." Zeke blinked at her. "Can you breathe now?" She nodded, feeling her throat tighten. "Yeah, thanks to your dad." Zayden's eyes softened. She sat beside them, ignoring the way her expensive heels pinched. Zeke offered her a sip of his juice. She politely declined. They talked for an hour. About nothing. About everything. About dinosaurs and hotel laundry mishaps and why CEOs sometimes needed to run away from meetings. When Zayden walked her to her car, she hesitated. "Are you free tomorrow night?" she asked. "Depends, what's the occasion?" "I want to take you to dinner." He blinked, like real dinner, with menus and silverware. "Fancy dinner," she said with a smile. "My treat." Zayden grinned. "You got a babysitter for billionaires." "Not yet," she said, "but I'm working on it." He nodded. "All right, CEO, I'll let you buy me dinner, but only if I get to pick the dessert." She leaned in, close enough to smell the faint scent of soap and city air on him. "It's a deal." As she drove away, hands steady on the wheel for the first time in days, she realized something that made her heart skip. She had no idea where this was going. But she wanted to find out. The valet opened the sleek black car door in front of the restaurant, but Nora didn't move. Her fingers hovered near the handle, her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her throat. She wasn't nervous about the dinner. She dined with prime ministers and hedge fund legends, but this was different. This man wasn't impressed by spreadsheets or market shares. He didn't care about her title. Zayden was already waiting inside when she finally stepped onto the curb. He wore a navy button-down and charcoal slacks, both clearly new, both a little stiff like he wasn't used to dressing up. His hair was still damp at the edges, like he'd showered right before coming. She noticed a small adhesive bandage near his knuckle. He stood as she approached, his eyes holding hers. "Hi," she said, brushing a curl off her shoulder. "You clean up well." "You look like you walked out of a magazine," he replied, his voice low and warm. "Had to Google what a wine fork was before I came." She laughed, tension easing slightly. "There's no test, I promise." The hostess guided them to a corner table with floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the city glittered. Inside, the room hummed with soft jazz and clinking glassware. Nora caught a few people glancing their way, likely wondering who the striking man was beside her and why he looked like he belonged to a different kind of world. He opened the menu, eyebrows lifting slightly. "This place has 5 kinds of water." She leaned in. "I recommend the one with bubbles. It makes you feel like you're celebrating something." He looked up. "Are we?" "I don't know yet," she said honestly. The waiter appeared and they ordered. Duck confit for her. Braised short ribs for him. He asked questions about half the ingredients, and Nora loved that he didn't pretend to know what he didn't. When the waiter left, he leaned forward slightly. "So, what happens in your world after someone walks out of a billion-dollar meeting mid-decision?" "I got 4 angry messages, 2 confused ones, and one from my assistant asking if I finally snapped," she said, lifting her wine glass. told her, had a moment of clarity. He tilted his head, and what did the moment say? That I didn't know who was building everything for anymore. His expression shifted, serious now. That's a hell of a thing to realize in a boardroom. She nodded. The room was full of people making decisions about the future, but none of them had anything to lose. No one there had ever had to choose between groceries and rent. They were talking about layoffs like they were numbers on a graph, not people. You ever have to make that kind of choice? He asked. She met his eyes. Not since I was 14. He didn't ask for more. He just nodded, like he understood without needing the details. The food arrived and conversation paused. Nora watched him take a bite, then pause mid-chew. I don't even know what this is, he said finally, but I want to write a poem about it. She laughed, truly amused. I'll commission you, 1 poem per course. He set down his fork and leaned back. Almost didn't come tonight. Why? He looked out the window. Because I didn't think I'd fit in here. I still don't. You don't have to, she said. That's kind of the point. He studied her for a moment. You're not what I expected. She raised a brow. What did you expect? Someone who wears sharp clothes and says sharp things. But you're softer, not in a bad way, just not what I pictured when I saw your name on that building downtown. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She set down her glass. Most people try to impress me. You're the first person who's actually seen me. He didn't look away. Maybe that's why you came back to the bench. Their plates were cleared. Dessert was ordered molten chocolate cake, per his request. As they waited, she glanced down at his hand. What happened to your finger? He followed her gaze. Zeke and I were building a pillow fort. I lost a fight with a lamp. She smiled. Battle scars from bedtime duties. Pretty much, you ever want kids? The question surprised her not because it was inappropriate, but because no one had ever asked her that, without an agenda behind it. I think I used to, she said slowly. But then time passed, and I got busy proving myself. It stopped being a question and started being a closed door. He nodded. Zeke wasn't planned, but he gave structure to the chaos. I stopped thinking about what I wanted and started thinking about what he needed. Nora leaned in, her voice barely above the clink of silverware around them. What do you want now? He hesitated. A chance at something real. No games, no pretending, just room to breathe. The dessert arrived, breaking the moment. They shared a spoon, passing it back and forth like teenagers. Afterward, he walked her to her car beneath the awning. The doorman opened the door, but she didn't step inside. I don't want to say goodnight yet. He looked at her, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. Then don't. She reached for his hand. Come with me. He hesitated. Zeke's with my neighbor, but only until midnight. Then we've got a few hours, she said. Let's use them. They drove without speaking, the air charged with something neither of them wanted to name just yet. She brought him to her apartment, a modern space high above the city, all glass and skyline and silence. He stepped inside, took it in without comment. She went to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of wine, set one on the counter beside him. It's strange, she said, watching him. I've had this place for years, but tonight's the first time it feels like it's not just a set piece. He looked at her, then really looked. That's because tonight, you're not playing a part. She stepped closer, her fingertips brushing his. Neither are you. He kissed her then, not because it was expected, not because the setting demanded it, but because it felt inevitable. Like something that had been building since the moment she couldn't breathe on a bench, and he gave her permission to fall apart. And for the first time in a very long time, Nora didn't feel like she was holding the world together with sheer force of will. She just felt held. Zayden hadn't touched the wine. It sat untouched on the kitchen island while he stood barefoot near the window, the skyline glittering behind him like a stage set he didn't belong in. Nora watched him from across the room, curled into the arm of her leather couch, her legs folded beneath her as if she were trying to make herself smaller. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then, without turning, he said, "It's been almost 5 years since I've been in a place this quiet." She tilted her head, not even when Zeke's asleep. He gave a low exhale. Even then, the silence is filled with other things. Worry, schedules, laundry I forgot to switch over, a list that never stops growing. She pulled her knees tighter, the soft blanket she'd grabbed clutched around her shoulders. "You carry a lot." "So do you." He finally turned, leaning back against the glass. "You ever wonder if we're all just pretending we're fine because we're scared of what happens if we admit we're not?" She didn't look away. "I stopped pretending the moment I walked off that rooftop." He crossed the room slowly, settling into the chair opposite her. "And now?" "I'm still figuring that out." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line, coming here tonight." "You didn't," she said quickly. "You were exactly what I needed." He studied her, his voice quieter now. "I'm not used to being needed." She hesitated. "You're not used to being wanted." He didn't answer that. Instead, he asked, "What happens to someone like me in your world?" She tucked a curl behind her ear. "He comes to dinner, he makes me laugh, he reminds me I'm more than a title, and then he keeps showing up." Zayden shifted in his seat. "I don't want to be just a chapter in your rebellion." Nora blinked. "Is that what you think this is?" "I think sometimes people who live inside pressure cookers need a way to blow the steam. And I don't want to be your release valve." "I don't use people." He nodded. "I believe you, but I've been underestimated by people who do." She stood, moving toward him slowly, barefoot now too. "I came back to that bench because couldn't stop thinking about you, not because I was trying to escape anything." He looked up at her. The distance between them narrowed. "I have nothing to offer you," he said quietly. "I'm still figuring things out every day. I'm one flat tire away from a disaster most weeks." She crouched in front of him. "I don't need you to offer me anything. I just want you to let me in." He closed his eyes briefly. "Zeke's going to ask questions. Then we'll answer them, together." When he opened his eyes again, something in his expression had shifted. The weight hadn't disappeared, but it had realigned like he'd set down a piece of it, even if just for the moment. "I have to go," he said reluctantly. "It's almost midnight." She nodded. "I'll walk you out." They didn't speak in the elevator, but when they reached the lobby, she stopped him near the glass doors. "I'm not asking for promises, just honesty." Zayden met her gaze. "Then here's the truth I want more, but I don't know what that looks like yet." She reached for his hand. "We'll figure it out." Outside, the car he'd called pulled up. He opened the door, then paused, turning back to her. "You ever been to a street fair?" She blinked. "Not since I was in college." "There's one in Queens next week. Zeke's been talking about it for days. You want to come?" The question wasn't casual. It wasn't a throwaway. It was an invitation into something real. She smiled. "Yeah, I do." He nodded, then climbed in. The car disappeared into the city, and Nora stood there for a long moment, her fingers tingling from where they'd touched his. She'd spent years building a world so airtight nothing could reach her. Now, the first crack had let something in. Not chaos, not collapse, but something she hadn't let herself believe in for a long time. Hope. 3 days later, she stood on a sidewalk in Queens, holding a bag of cotton candy, and watching Zeke attempt to win a stuffed bear by hurling beanbags at metal cans. Zayden stood beside her, arms crossed, a grin tugging at the edge of his mouth as Zeke missed again and again. I told him the odds were rigged, he said. He told me I lacked vision. Nora laughed. He's got your stubbornness. He's got my everything. Zeke missed again, then turned, scowling. I need a bigger arm. Zayden pointed at Nora. She lifts entire corporations. I bet she's got a killer throwing arm. Zeke lit up. Can you try? Nora crouched beside him. Only if I get a turn with the bear if I win. Deal. She stood, narrowed her eyes at the target, then threw. The cans toppled. Zeke screamed with delight. The vendor handed her a neon green bear. She passed it to Zeke, who immediately hugged it like it was treasure. Zayden looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. You're good at this, he said. At carnival games. At showing up. They wandered through the fair, the three of them, weaving between booths and food carts, the air thick with fried dough and laughter. Zeke rode a spinning ride twice and begged for a third. Nora bought him a lemonade slushie the size of his face. Zayden watched them both like he couldn't quite believe it was real. Later, as Zeke napped in the car on the drive back, Zayden glanced at her from the driver's seat. You didn't have to come today. I wanted to. He tapped the wheel. You didn't flinch once, even when the guy at the ring toss called you ma'am. I've been called worse in board meetings. He laughed softly. You know, I kept thinking you'd realize this wasn't your world, that you'd step back. She reached over, resting her hand lightly over his. I'm not stepping back, Zayden. He glanced at her, then down at their joined hands. I don't know how this ends, he admitted. Neither do I. But it's real. Yes, she said, it's real. They drove the rest of the way in silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. And for the first time in years, neither one of them felt alone. Zayden stood in the doorway of Nora's office at Ashford Tech, one hand resting on the frame, the other holding a paper bag that smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted almonds. You weren't at the bench, he said, voice low. Nora looked up from her desk, a little caught off guard, her fingers still resting on the glass of water she hadn't taken a sip from. I had a meeting, she said, then another one, then I realized hadn't stepped outside in 7 hours. He walked in, placed the bag gently on her desk, and sat across from her without waiting to be asked. Zeke made you something, he said, pulling out a crumpled piece of construction paper. It's supposed to be you riding a dinosaur. He says it's your battle armor. Nora reached for it, her lips curving. That's me. I look powerful. You look dangerous, he said. He thinks you fight villains. She traced the lines with her thumb. I'm trying to fight the right ones. Zayden leaned back in the chair, watching her. You've been somewhere else all day. What's going on? She set the drawing down carefully, then folded her hands together. The board offered me a buyout. His brow lifted. You're leaving. They want someone who will push through a merger with a tech firm in Singapore, strip down the staff, outsource development, maximize profit. He waited. I told them no, she said finally. I told them if they wanted that, they could do it without my name on the building. Zayden didn't speak for a moment, then he leaned forward. You just gave up everything you've built. No, she said. I just stopped building it for people who don't care whether it collapses on someone else. He nodded once slowly. So what now? I'm setting up something new, she said. Smaller, more focused, ethical development, fair wages, tech that actually helps people instead of replacing them. Zayden gave a quiet sound of approval. That sounds like something the lady on the bench would be proud of. She looked at him. I want you to help. He blinked. Me. You know how to fix what's broken. You know how to listen. You see things most people miss. I fix boilers and elevators. You manage people. You solve problems in real time under pressure. That's more than most executives can say. He didn't answer right away. She stood, walked around the desk, and leaned against the edge beside him. I don't want to build this alone. I want people I can trust. People who have seen the world outside penthouses and private jets. He met her eyes. You're serious. I'm offering you a job and a partnership and a chance to build something that matters. Zayden leaned his elbows on his knees, thinking. I'd need time and someone to watch Zeke during the day. I already spoke to someone, she said. Dana, the woman next door who watches him sometimes. She's interested in full-time. I'd cover it. He looked up. You planned this. I thought about what I needed, she said. Then I thought about what you might need too. He stood slowly. This is more than a dinner and a bench, Nora. She stepped closer. It always was, we were just too scared to call it what it is. He reached up, brushed his thumb gently across her cheek. I'm not scared anymore, he said. Good, she replied, because I've already told 3 investors you're joining the team. He laughed, really laughed, and pulled her into him, wrapping his arms around her waist. I'm in, he said against her hair, but I still want to be home in time for bedtime stories. We'll write that into your contract, she said. They kissed, not like something new, but like something that had been waiting. 3 months later, the new company launched from a refurbished warehouse in Brooklyn. There were plants in the windows, whiteboards covered in ideas, and a kitchen where people actually ate lunch together. Zayden oversaw operations. Nora ran strategy. Zeke had his own tiny desk beside the front reception where he colored and offered unsolicited advice. One afternoon, while Nora was reviewing prototypes, Zayden walked in holding a small velvet box. She looked up. What's that? He opened it. Inside was a ring simple, elegant, set with a single sapphire. I don't have a yacht, he said. I don't own an island, but I have a future, and I want you in it. She stared at the ring, then at him. This is fast, she whispered. It's right, he said. Her eyes filled, her voice steady as she stepped toward him. Yes, she said, yes to all of it. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Outside, the city moved on, fast, loud, unforgiving. But inside that warehouse, 2 people who'd met on a day everything broke apart found something worth building from the pieces. Together. The ceremony wasn't grand. No cathedral, no string quartet, no cascading floral archway imported from Europe. It was a rooftop. The same rooftop Nora had once fled from, years ago, when her world had felt too tight to breathe. Now, it was strung with soft lights and dotted with wooden chairs filled with people who actually mattered. It was Zeke who walked Nora down the aisle, one tiny hand gripping her fingers, the other clutching a velvet pillow with a pair of rings tied unevenly in the center. You look like a princess, he whispered when they reached the end. She crouched to his level, smoothing a strand of his hair behind his ear. That makes you the prince. He beamed, then ran to stand beside Zayden, who waited at the altar in a deep gray suit with sleeves slightly rolled, his tie crooked in a way that made her heart ache. She took his hand. You're late, he whispered, eyes warm. You're lucky I came at all, she shot back, voice trembling slightly. My dress zipper broke, my heel snapped, and your son insisted I practice my vows with his stuffed bear first. Zayden laughed, low and genuine. Was the bear impressed? He cried. Then I'm in trouble. They faced each other as the officiant began to speak, but neither of them really heard the words. Their eyes locked, and the city fell away. When it was time for vows, Zayden didn't read from a note. He didn't clear his throat or pretend to be polished. I used to think love was something other people had time for, people with more money or more freedom or less baggage. I didn't think I deserved it. Not really. But then you showed up, and you didn't ask me to be anything other than who I already was. You let me in, even when I had nothing to offer. And now, I can't imagine a world where I don't wake up next to you or where Zeke doesn't call you his family. Nora's throat tightened, but she didn't falter. I built a life to prove could. Climbed every ladder, broke every ceiling, but I never stopped feeling like something was missing. And then one day, a stranger handed me a plastic dinosaur and told me to breathe. You didn't fix me. You didn't try. You just stood beside me until it could stand on my own again. And now, I want nothing more than to stand beside you every day for the rest of my life. The kiss was soft, reverent, the kind that makes people forget there's a world around them. Zeke clapped the loudest. Afterward, there was dancing under the stars. The rooftop had been transformed with fairy lights and mismatched lanterns. There was no catering staff in tuxedos, just long tables of food from local vendors they both loved. Zayden's sister brought homemade cookies. Nora's assistant cried into her champagne and declared it the best wedding she'd ever attended. Zayden made sure Zeke got the first piece of cake, a lopsided tower of chocolate and raspberry made by a bakery that had once saved Nora's birthday when she worked through the entire day. Later, under the glow of the last lanterns, Zayden pulled Nora close. "Do you remember the first thing I ever said to you?" he asked, brushing her hair back. "You told me I was safe." He nodded. You still are." She leaned into him, "And you're not alone." They danced until Zeke fell asleep on a cushioned bench, his arms wrapped around the same green bear Nora had won him at the fair. They carried him home together. Months passed and their company grew, not explosively but steadily. They took on projects that prioritized people over profit. They worked late, sometimes side by side on the same couch, laptops open and bare feet tangled. Zayden never stopped fixing things: pipes, printers, people's moods. But now he had a title, Director of Operations. He still got grease on his hands sometimes, but now it came with a corner office and a desk covered in drawings from Zeke. Nora stopped giving speeches that sounded like armor. She started telling the truth even when it was hard, even when it meant admitting she didn't have all the answers. She was still sharp, still brilliant, but now she made space for softness too. Every Sunday, they had pancakes in pajamas. Zeke insisted on blueberries even when they stained his fingers. They always ate on the floor, laughing when the syrup dripped onto the rug. They never cleaned it right away. One night, Zayden built a blanket fort in the living room. Nora crawled inside, holding a flashlight under her chin while reading Zeke a story about a brave dinosaur who protected a queen. When she looked up, Zayden was watching her, eyes full. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm just happy." She reached over, lacing their fingers together. "You should get used to that." Years later, when reporters asked about their company's success, Nora always gave the same answer. "It started with a rooftop, and a bench, and a man who reminded me how to breathe." But the real story wasn't one she told the press. It was told in quiet mornings with sleepy kisses, in bedtime stories interrupted by giggles, in every ordinary day that never felt ordinary again. They didn't need a fairy tale. They'd built something better. A life together, forever.